if you have questions during the session, if you could just go ahead and drop them in the chat for me so that when we open up to comments, I can go ahead and give those to our presenters. Kyle and Jaleesa, if you'd like to start presenting, that would be great.
All right, thank you so much, Kayla, and good morning / good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us in the breakout. We're really excited today to tell you a little bit about our perspective and the approaches we're taking in Maryland towards resilience. So Executive Director Strickland said this morning, historically, emergency management agencies have focused on response and recovery. And we're trying to change that narrative and really focus on what we can do as policymakers to bring resources to Maryland to help us stop disasters from happening. We're doing that in a number of ways. Like Kayla mentioned, our director, the Disaster Risk Reduction Directorate, leads a number of programs that focus on resilience. So first off, we're focused on building community-based projects. This means projects that have the greatest impact across the state, not necessarily just in a specific neighborhood or community, but regionally across the state. Now, there's a number of funding sources, both at the state and federal level, that we're working to leverage to build these community-based projects, but really, we're leaning on our local jurisdictions for innovative approaches to disaster risk reduction and resilience. So related to that, we're focused on building partnerships with the whole community. So the whole community consists of not only government, the private sector, non-governmental services, as well as citizens. We're working with these communities because disaster risk is not just a governmental issue, it's an issue for the entire community. One particular area of focus that we're really honing in on is the private sector. So Allegra Tartaglia, our private sector engagement manager, is over in the other breakout room talking about our private sector, our P3 partnerships. We think that's an area of tremendous growth and partnership in the future. And then we're really looking to build programs and funding that's flexible, that can really meet the needs of any threat or hazard. Historically, grant funding has been very narrowly focused and restrictive with the types of services and projects that you can complete with these. So we're looking to build programs that are flexible and innovative and really speak towards the reality of disaster risk these days as we see it. And then finally, transformative mitigation. So again, historically in the United States, we've done one-off projects that don't have a broad approach to hazard mitigation. Our focus in the directorate and the mitigation branch is really transforming mitigation, looking at all threats and hazards that impact Maryland as well as the region overall. So this is kind of the broad overview of what we're doing in Maryland for risk reduction, community engagement, and mitigation. With that, Jaleesa, I'll turn it over to you to proceed.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Kyle. And good morning, everyone. So I just want to build off of what Kyle just went over and really talk about how we approach community engagement, like more at our local level in Maryland. And so as Edwin was kind of like mentioning earlier in his presentation, is just that it's critically important to make sure that the community is involved in any type of resilience projects. I always say from beginning to the end, because as we start to implement these projects, our government administration may change, the workers who are helping to implement the project might change as well too. And ultimately, it's our community members that are still going to be living there and are the ones that will probably be charged with, upkeeping these projects long-term, just to make sure that they are successful in the long run. So I think it's critically important from the initial planning stages through implementation to make sure that the community is engaged. The other thing I want to point out is I am really a huge fan of making sure that resilience projects ultimately are co-beneficial and that they are true community amenities as well too. Oftentimes with some of the resilience projects that we might be implementing, whether it is a acquisition and demolition project, it can sometimes feel like we are taking away something from a community. And I think that if we can be innovative and change that narrative and truly provide a benefit back to the community through some type of amenity, that will allow us to be more successful in the work that we're doing as well too. And then the last thing that I'll mention really quick is just, again, stressing the importance of taking a whole community approach. I have learned that it's critically important to also look at these projects from a multi-generational perspective as well too, because these projects, they will be 50-year projects, 75, 100-year projects. And so it's really important for our youth right now to understand the importance of the work that we're doing and the importance of those projects, so that as they mature and get older, and these projects are still in place, they understand the need for those projects and the need for the upkeep and everything. And then including different kind of stakeholders in the community as well too. So we found a lot, places of worship have been vitally important as we do disaster recovery and then continue to build community resilience as well too. A lot of time those places of worship, they already have built-in trust within the community. And so it's really nice to partner with them through and continue on with our community engagement. And then another group that I really like to focus on is making sure that when we're doing projects, especially when it's residential projects, that we're not only prioritizing and focusing on homeowners, but also renters as well too. And so with that, very short, but 3 of the points that I really wanted to highlight about community engagement, I am going to pass it over to Nako now. And I look forward to us chatting later on in this session. Thank you.
Just sharing my screen. Okay, for my introduction, I tapped from some experience in the US as well as in the Netherlands. And I will start a very brief introduction of our company we're working. We are an engineering and design consultancy worldwide, based in the UK, Netherlands, South Africa, Indonesia as home countries. 6,000 people and considered the oldest Dutch engineering company. We approach resilience in cities from different ways, and we build on key principles. And citizen engagement is one of those, besides the transparent governance, integrated system approach, looking at extreme weather events, stress testing, combining efforts of business and government, and the mix of different resilience enhancing measures. 2 of my very dear projects I worked in the US was already mentioned also in the plenary session, was the Greater New Orleans Urban Water Plan, in which I collaborated with David Wagoner, but also with Deltares. And for many years, we try to advocate that water in the city is important, as important in the spatial planning, but also in the city and as a living environment as part of the DNA of such a city. And in post Hurricane Sandy, in Rebuild by Design, I was included in the team for the Hoboken strategy and the waterfront on the Hudson River. And in the Netherlands, maybe 2 interesting projects on multifunctional spatial design, but also to include the people, to generate a certain movement, engage the people and citizens in those projects. One is the Rotterdam case, and especially the Waterwise or the Weatherwise City program, and the Water Sensitive Rotterdam. That is the approach for citizens and how to include them, because it is not only by the Rotterdam, the city, but it is also inclusive between city and citizen, and also by the citizens themselves. And another project is the multifunctional coastal defense at Katwijk, which is also used as a parking garage and has multiple programs to it in the coastal area. While working in Hoboken, New Jersey, part of the design or the competition was to reach out to the community, other stakeholders. And for this, we developed various tools like the Flood Risk 101, but also a questionnaire to engage people and ask questions in a very interactive, visual way. What we also developed was a simulation, a program, a sort of almost like a serious game, that people can actually understand what is my risk where I'm living here. Do I experience another hurricane, another storm surge? And what can I do myself, like an intervention on a local local plot, house scale, etc. And also we worked on expositions and education as well. And one of the interesting things we constructed was a interactive scale model of the Hudson River, the embankment, Hoboken area, and the Palisades. And it was transparent scale model because we can actually project all kinds of images from underneath that actually light the scale model, like flood maps. You can actually see, is my house prone to flooding? Or when I do an intervention like a compartment flood defense, or I do make my roofs green, what's happening then during a rainfall event? And of course, we did a lot of engagements in open house or having discussions and let the people actually be co-owner of the process. And this is an image from the New Orleans project we did. This is actually a scale model students are working with to understand water management, topography, and the drainage system, how it works. Part of New Orleans is actually below sea level. So it is about the awareness. And this project of water literacy is called the ripple effect. Yeah, so just some examples of my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanko. So I actually only have one question so far in the chat. It is directed to Nanko, but I know that all of our presenters can absolutely add in more. So Nanko, what is the role of urban trees and permeable socks and parking spaces in stormwater management?
Actually, looking at stormwater management, especially in the urban area, it's about the flow or the route of the water. So from roofs, you have sidewalks and pavements, of course. And the managing the stormwater is about storage versus discharge. And what we want to achieve is that we slow the flow. And for this, the urban trees, when it is unpaved area, but also in porous paving, you can actually achieve a certain delay where the water can be more controlled in avoiding or minimizing flash floods or fast runoff.
Okay, great. Julissa, do you have anything you wanted to add on that? No. Okay. So
sorry. Yeah,
go ahead, Julissa.
I was trying to, of course, trying to get off mute. It's always the fun part of the day. Yeah, so I would say in my previous positions, I've done a lot of work with urban forestry. So in Baltimore City, urban trees were critically important, not only for the flood mitigation benefits, but also for reducing the urban heat island effect with extreme temperatures in Baltimore City because of so much surface. And they also aided in like the air quality as well too. So for Baltimore City, there were a lot of benefits for them to plant urban trees. And so of course, everything that was just said, but then also those other co-benefits are really important as well too.
Yeah, that's true. So this is this co-benefiting on. Actually, that was also part of this Blue-Green Futures project we are doing in the US with the city of Portland in Oregon. And we're looking at from the citizens and other stakeholders, actors' perspective about their about framing also and about acceptance. Instead of having physical or more gray infrastructure, to implement as an alternative the blue-green infrastructure instead. And that applies also a different kind of maintenance, of course, and acceptance in this public space, and also a different relation in the city planning and use of the city.
Thank you. So we have some questions rolling in. I did want everyone to know that I will, if we can't get to all of the questions today, I'm going to copy them into a document and pass them out to our presenters afterwards. So hopefully we can address them in the next week or two. So Jaleesa and Kyle, this question is for MEMA specifically. How can MEMA assist communities affected with a lot with our cities? Can we help retrofit sidewalks and parking spaces with permeable pavers so that we can grow large trees that can mitigate the temperature through transpiration and shading, like is also done in Dutch cities? Is that something, do we have any current projects that we're working on with that? What's your experience?
Yeah, Jaleesa, I'll let you field that one with your experience in Baltimore City from the urban environment, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So the first thing that I'll say is how can MEMA help? So our primary tools that we use to fund and implement our resilience and mitigation projects are predominantly FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program. So it's the Federal Emergency Management Agency that we primarily use. So they do support activities to help mitigate like extreme heat and temperature. The other thing I would say that we currently have in process right now is the state of Maryland is updating our statewide hazard mitigation plan. And in that plan, we have chosen to profile extreme temperatures, so extreme heat and extreme cold for the state of Maryland. And so what that does is that sets us up where we can conduct a hazard identification and a risk assessment so we know exactly where our vulnerabilities are as they relate to extreme temperature. And then from that, the next part of that planning process is to also develop mitigation strategies to address the vulnerabilities that we identified in our plan. So those are kind of the things from a planning perspective that we are doing right now. As far as other types of projects that I think are very beneficial is number one, to definitely, and what we want to start doing at MEMA too, is to start looking at non-traditional funding sources. So branching out from those FEMA grants that we primarily administer right now and seeing what other type of grants and financing mechanisms there are to help us move along our resilience efforts within the state. But in addition to focusing on kind of like the urban tree plantings to help with extreme heat or extreme cold, I think the next big focused area is really going to be on building codes as well too. So in Baltimore City, it is a very old city in terms of American settlement. And so the building materials that were used, they're older. The construction methods that were used, those are older as well too. So as buildings are starting to be remodeled or anything like that, I think it's very important for us to look at what type of insulation do they have, what type of windows are being put into these places. Do they have adequate air conditioning as well too? So I think as we kind of progress, we look at all of those different tools that we have to implement resilience. So we have planning, we also have building codes, and a lot of other tools at our disposal. So I would say we use all of those across the board.
Thank you, Jaleesa. And actually, this is a really interesting question that is open to the group. So what strategies for citizen engagement have been used during the pandemic? Are there any strategies for using those without internet? And would we incorporate any of those strategies in the future? Thank you for Molly for asking that question.
Go first.
Well, I know from the beginning.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Go ahead, Nanko. You go ahead.
Okay. Actually, I can tell something maybe from the Netherlands. During the pandemic, there was already, of course, an interest in having green urban spaces, but I think it is more highlighted. So there's a much more growing interest in having biodiversity, investing in green space, because people are more at home and very cherish that green space is very close to home. So what we see in Europe, Netherlands also, is that a lot of cities and also countries are announcing bigger sums of investments to build new parks. For instance, in Rotterdam, so past summer, they announced to build 7 additional or new parks in the next decade. And they allocated a funding of over, I think, almost 250 million. So there's a big ambition. At the same time, Amsterdam did as well, because that is a competition, I think. And also another city in the Netherlands may be interesting, because they announced to decrease the paved areas and replace that by green. So these are more from a top, I would say, bottom down approach, or maybe from city leaders or city administration. And at the same time, people are more into, let's say, allotments, gardening. There's much more interest. So you can actually see that people buy, let's say, seeds and etc., plants and shrubs and trees, and people also thinking about their street, how to alternative use the street instead of having only paved areas and cars. So people are looking very more, they have more attention to their own surrounding.
Definitely. Jaleesa, Kyle, any additions?
Yeah, so I'll speak kind of specifically to how to reach people without internet access. So one thing that we did is we truly went back to basics, and we handed out pamphlets. And so before the pandemic, we're working in this community with other state agencies, Maryland Department of the Environment, Maryland Insurance Administration. And it is an older community. It is a mix of homeowners and renters, and they don't have a lot of monetary resources either in this community. So we really wanted to start doing a lot of education and awareness about some of the flooding that they were experiencing in their area. So things like, you know, the classic turn around, don't drown, different things like that. And so when the pandemic hit the US in this particular area, food security definitely became an issue. So there were sites set up for food distribution during the pandemic, just to make sure that those community members still had access to healthy food. And so what we did is we worked with some of the leaders in that community to develop a pamphlet of information specifically geared towards the demographic within that community. Like I said, renters and also elderly people. And we put those pamphlets in their food distribution bags that they picked up throughout the course of the pandemic. So again, like really taking it back to kind of, you know, where we started off with public engagement prior to the internet and everything. But we really found that to be successful in the community members. They really enjoy truly being empowered in that process to really guide the development of that pamphlet, and us not just taking kind of some of our pre-made pamphlets and handing those out. So we really enjoyed that.
Kyle, did you want to add anything else?
No, I think Jaleesa covered it well.
Okay, great. Okay, so another question we have coming in. Does MEMA work with early forecasting systems and temporary flood defense systems to minimize damages?
Yeah, so I can take that one, Kella. That's a great question. Yeah, so we have risk analysis team at MEMA who's focused solely on gathering data and figuring out how we visualize that data and leverage that data to make operational decisions in advance of a disaster with our operations staff in the Emergency Operations Center. So we're looking at these kinds of forecasting systems and partnering with a number of federal agencies who provide these types of services, the United States Geological Survey, the National Oceanic Administration, NOAA has some flood gauge capability. And then beside the government response, there's a lot of kind of think tank and innovative companies that are like building these flood gauge systems that are really inexpensive and easy to maintain. So I think, you know, kind of the traditional networks of flood gauges that we've seen in the past are going to really go by the wayside as we see cheaper alternatives really coming in from, you know, really innovative companies that want to make products that can keep the community safe. So yeah, it's something we look at. In Maryland, we have a real problem with flash flooding from extreme weather events. I would say over the last couple of years, we're seeing these 6-inch rainfall plus in a matter of minutes incidents that continue to occur, and it's really testing our urban infrastructure in terms of being able to deal with it. So it's something we're looking at for sure, and it's a great question. Thanks for asking it.
Okay, and then for the group, what are your thoughts on the development of community resiliency hubs? Do you think there are co-benefits if solar energy and stormwater management are integrated in the infrastructure?
I can start with this one as well. Another really good question. So at MEMA, we're really interested in the concept of resilience hubs from the standpoint of disaster recovery and survivor assistance. We're working on a project with the city of Annapolis to install a resilience hub that will be a microgrid project in the hopes that, you know, when a disaster occurs, the community can kind of descend on this community site, and there'll be power, and, you know, there'll be backups and really the ability potentially to locate disaster recovery services at this site. So that's an active project we have going on. We're also going to be applying for a grant to do a study across Maryland for microgrids and developing microgrids in areas where our state shelters are. So again, when there's a disaster, when we have a power loss, our state shelters will have power, and we'll be able to put infrastructure there to help really jumpstart the recovery efforts. Because, you know, two of the most critical resources for the way we do disaster assistance these days is really power and internet access. We do a lot of registration of disaster survivors with web-based apps. So if we have power and if we have mobile broadband capability, we can really jump to recovery. So it's something we're really interested in as an agency, and something we're continuing to work on with our partners across government.
Nanko, Jaleesa, do you have anything to add?
Just this from our experience in the Netherlands, we still have a lot to, let's say, progress to make in community resilience hubs. Although we have more, I think it's more centralized, I would say, than in the community. And we have, of course, resiliency response areas and safe havens. So there are protocols, and but I think it could be more close to the communities in this case.
And Kayla, the last thing I'll add on that, and also do a shameless plug for the matchmaking after today's event as well too, is that the representatives from Baltimore City's Office of Sustainability, they've been working in resilience hubs for a few years now, and also it's another great example of partnering with faith-based organizations where you have a structure, and then you have that kind of network already built into the community.
Did you actually, on that point, Jaleesa, do you have any specific pointers that you would tell someone if they are looking for tips on how to work with faith communities to achieve more resilience?
I did see that question in the chat. I would say, again, just when you are approaching like faith-based organizations for assistance, just really focusing on like the community aspect of your projects, and truly like pulling out kind of what those community benefits are going to be of your project as well too, and kind of why it's needed. We've done different scales of community projects, whether it is just a tree planting with a faith-based organization or something longer term for flood reduction as well too. So those would be my pointers. And then of course, as with anything in emergency management, do it before disasters, be proactive, and don't wait until after the disaster to start forming those partnerships.
Thank you. And we have just a couple minutes left here. And I did want to open up the discussion if someone does not have access to chat, if they wanted to come up on their video and unmute themselves if they wanted to ask their question. Just open it up for a couple of seconds, see if there's any interest. Okay, hearing none. We are getting system set up with our partners in the Netherlands Water Partnership. It's kind of a one-on-one. We've been referring to it as similar to speed dating, to match people up between their interests and other industry professionals. So in just a few minutes, you will be able to go ahead and join in on that. And Jaleesa, Kyle, Nanko, did you have anything to add? Last minute discussion?
Nothing for me, and just thank you to all the participants for joining us. As Kayla mentioned, we're happy to have one-on-ones, follow up with email afterwards as well. But we really do, we do think this work's important, and we're really glad that you all do too, by way of joining us today. So just thank you.
And As I'll just echo everything that Kyle said. Really honored to be able to kind of share our thoughts with you all today and kind of what we're doing, but then also to truly learn. I see some stuff going on in the chat that I'm getting really excited about with some of our other state agencies here at Maryland too, which is the true reason that we're here, is just to continue to build partnerships across sectors and across jurisdictional boundaries, like Director Strickland also pointed out this morning too. So thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you also from my side. I think it's a great discussion, and yeah, I think it is also a lot of material and discussion for to continue.
Thank you all. And I just wanted to open this up. Does anyone have any questions about how to access the one-on-one chats with industry experts? Just want to open that up, make sure everyone knows what to do with their next groupings. All right, great. Seems like everyone is on top of it and all set.
We can't hear you anymore, Kayla. You're on mute.
Sorry. Hopefully you can hear me now. I just said it seems like everybody is all set, which is great. We do have just a few more minutes open if anyone thinks of anything else before they jump to their next session. But other than that, we can absolutely give everyone just a very short break. I know it's been a busy morning or afternoon.
So a question just got added to the chat about how golf courses could help in Baltimore City with building resilience. Anybody want to answer that from either the MEMA side or NWP side?
Manco, you can go ahead and go first if you would like.
Yeah, there is something. A golf course is, of course, an area that actually is, let's say, unpaved. But at the other hand, it also uses a lot of water because it is always equipped with an irrigation, etc. But considering it has bunks and ponds and other areas where you can actually temporarily store maybe water or limit flooded areas elsewhere. In this case, it could be part of mitigation or adaptation of extreme floods or rainfall events. And the other thing is that we see, but I'm now not sure if that's the case in Baltimore, but sometimes golf courses are integrated more in the urban area, of course, like part of parks. It also can give people, when it is partly or open to the public, an area that is cooler than maybe the more urban dense area where the dwellings are.
I think that this question also is relevant to any outdoor sports facilities or even indoor sports facilities, not just golf courses. So if you have anything to offer, you know, you talked about the soccer stadium, but if you have any other insights to offer on other types of outdoor indoor sports and how they can help with resiliency.
Yeah, and it's of course also places where people meet each other. So it is also about building a community. In Amsterdam, we have a sports at the Mercator Plaza. So there's a sports facility, for swimming, but also for football, soccer, or whatever you can actually do there. But it is, in fact, the whole green is not only having eco roofs, but it's also equipped with eco walls. So you have a very natural indoor environment, almost like you're outside, but then it is protected, and it is well appreciated by people doing their sports and other recreational activities there.
All right, well, we are just 3 minutes away from being able to jump onto the one-on-ones. Once again, if you have any quick questions, feel free to ask them. But if not, we are glad that everyone was able to attend this afternoon, this morning. And we hope that you have lots to take away from this. And thank you to all 3 of our presenters. I'm excited to see all the networking that's happening in the chat. That's great. If you haven't checked that out yet, I highly recommend. If you have not seen it on the chat, Rachel has posted the link to the one-on-one chats that you can set up to attend after this meeting. And we wanted to mention that for everyone who has attended this conference, and if you're registered on the Match site, you will have access to that for, I think it's 30 days. So if you can't do it today, hopefully you will take advantage of that in the next couple weeks. Additionally, the recordings from today's breakout sessions, the plenary will be made available in about a week, and they will be posted on the event page. So be sure to check back